Freedom Ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Macy Gray in studio this morning. We're happy to have her.
I'm trying.
Love your work.
Thank you.
That's your hit song. I try.
Right.
And we're pleased to be joined now by our friend Matt Mackowiak. He is a Republican strategist and president of the Potomac Strategy Group. We've got a lot to talk about in terms of the Republican Party and its current constitution. And Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Before we get to personnel, interesting Bill McGurn piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday suggesting that Trump has really missed an opportunity when it comes to trying to advance his legislative agenda, whether it's on Obamacare replacement at present or tax reform in the not-too-distant future, ostensibly, by not using the bully pulpit of his office. And he references, for example, Ronald Reagan, who effectively used it to advance his tax cut proposals in 1981, including Ronald Reagan, who's remembered fondly as kind of the cuddly grandfather, but was very partisan and very pointed and pushed Democrats around through the use of that bully pulpit, communicating directly to the people. I know Trump's been doing campaign rallies, but when he gives prepared remarks on topic, they've been well-constructed and well-crafted and easily understood. What about that idea of an Oval Office address or two on these important issues when congressional Republicans are having a difficulty getting it together?
Yeah, I think there's no question that for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to build public support and use the power of the presidency to shape public opinion. If you think about some of the best moments the first 6 months, the State of the Union address, which I guess it was technically called a joint session address, his unveiling of his Supreme Court nominee, his terrorism speech in Riyadh, and his speech in Germany. And so it shows that with adequate preparation, with real cohesive teamwork, with discipline and focus, he can rise to these moments and perform at a very high level. The problem is those moments have been rare in the first 6 months. And if you look at healthcare as one example, I mean, there was almost no effort by the White House to provide cover for Republican members on the House side or the Senate side to support the healthcare bill, and the healthcare bill was did not have wide public support. The Democrats were attacking it left and right, and were very effective, and the Republicans really weren't defending it at all. And so, part of that is I think that there's been some turmoil inside the White House. They haven't had a very well organized, disciplined communication team. Obviously, that starts with the president, who is fairly impulsive in terms of his communications. So I would agree with Bill that Bill McGurn in the Journal that is a missed opportunity. And listen, when you're in the mid-30s or high 30s, it's very hard to persuade members of the House and Senate to go with you if what you're proposing is not popular. He just doesn't have the power of the presidency is less than it should be, because he's not, number one, his approval ratings are historically low, and number two, he's not using that bully pulpit power to shape public opinion and to then persuade elected officials to do what he wants.
And by the way, just on that score, because I know we get into this back and forth with Trump supporters about whose numbers we're using when it comes to the president's approval rating and such, it's Rasmussen that now has Trump under 40.
Rasmussen has him. Yeah, even Rasmussen has him under 40. I mean, generally, I use Gallup as the best numbers, and sure, there's some difference between one poll or another. Some have him in the mid 30s, some had him in the high to mid 40s. But either way, he has fallen even from where he was when he was elected. He still has it's pretty clear he has a sharp and hard base of 35, 38% of the public that is strongly behind him. That is not enough to move Congress to bend to your will. You've really got to be at least in the mid 40s and ideally in the low to mid 50s.
Yeah, no, speaking of congressional members, General Kelly's going to have to deal directly with them on certain issues that he might not be too familiar with, such as the budget, tax reform, and health care. Do you think he'll be effective? I mean, more so than Priebus?
So I think internally, as it relates to personnel and the structure of the senior White House staff, I think he will be effective. I think the signal and the decision to fire Anthony Scaramucci was a very encouraging one. That basically it was his first official act as chief of staff on Monday morning was to remove someone who was fairly unhinged and undisciplined as communications director.
Yeah.
Now, to your question, we don't know whether he's going to be able to quickly, sort of absorb the substantive policy of a lot of these areas. He obviously has a few areas that he's very well up to speed on: military issues, homeland security, national security. I think what you're going to see is the vice president take a much higher profile and a much more critical role in negotiating directly with Congress. Remember, he'd been a leader on the House side as one of the 3 or 4 highest-ranking Republicans. He has really strong relationships on both sides, and he gets the policy. So I think you may see Mike Pence take a more active role on some of those issues. But sure, I mean, ideally you'd have the White House Chief of Staff negotiating very sensitive things up on Capitol Hill, and we'll see if General Kelly is able to do that.
When it comes to General Kelly and his asserting his influence, not just with respect to the mooch, but pointed this out a little earlier, it was interesting, something Brett Baer caught on Special Report last night, that there was also a statement about having full confidence in his cabinet secretaries.
Yeah.
And that necessarily includes Jeff Sessions. And I wonder if that should be read as the Jeff Sessions Twitter nonsense is over and Jeff Sessions is staying.
Yeah, I think it probably is being read that way. Look, keep in mind, I mean, General Kelly had been in the cabinet. He doesn't, he understands that leaving a cabinet member in a state of uncertainty is not good for that agency. It's not good for morale. It's just not good in any way. And of course, the Attorney General is a unique cabinet officer in that they are the top law enforcement official. They have some independent responsibilities, and even the reasoning behind what Trump was mad about was pretty thin to begin with. The choice to recuse, whether Trump likes the ramifications of that decision, was pretty clear cut. I mean, Sessions had been a pretty senior official on the campaign, and because the Russia investigation had the potential of looking into the campaign, he could not do that in an independent way without having a conflict of interest. So,
and there's also this issue of Kelly, just the how you do things seems to matter to Kelly. There was a report out that General Kelly considered resigning as Homeland Security Secretary after the Comey firing. And it seemed from, again, this report, which is unverified, but it's credible news source, it seemed it was much more about how Comey was treated than the underlying substance of the rationale for firing him. So, again, the sophomoric antics seem to have no place in a General Kelly White House.
No, that's right. I mean, keep in mind, this is one of the most decorated generals of his generation. Commander of Southern Command. He'd been a top aide to 2 secretaries of defense. Obviously served with distinction as Secretary of Homeland Security. I mean, you do things a certain way, and the lack of structure and discipline and even cohesion inside the White House had been a real problem for the first 6 months. You had warring factions. You had 4 or 5 different power centers. You had far too many people that could walk into the Oval Office for any reason or no reason at all at any time. They weren't controlling information flow. And, yeah, they handled a lot of things internally not well. Obviously, firing Jim Comey the way they did was one example. How about firing Reince Priebus the way they did, where he's literally pulled out of the motorcade in New York on Friday. So I do think you're going to start to see things done in a much more professional way, and I think that will be positive as well. Part of what General Kelly has to do is manage down in terms of the senior team in the White House, but he also has to manage up, and he and the president have to. They already have a fairly good relationship, but they're going to have to really have trust to be able to work together. And I think so far, again, it's only been 1 day, but initial indications are pretty positive.
Yeah, I like what he did yesterday. So now that we think Jeff Sessions is safe as Attorney General, who do you think is going to be the new Homeland Security Secretary?
Yeah, I mean, there was some chatter that maybe Sessions could get moved over to Homeland Security. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think that's likely. And even the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley said they will not be holding another confirmation hearing for a new Attorney General this year. So the senator has really stepped up to defend Sessions under some of Trump's criticism. I think the leading choice is probably Michael McCall, the House Homeland Security Chairman from Texas, who had been a finalist for that job the first time around. A very credible choice, former prosecutor, former high-ranking Justice Department official in the Bush years. You could have Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State in the state of Kansas, who's been an immigration hardliner. It is the vice chairman of the Election Integrity Commission that the White House appointed. I think those two names are getting a lot of attention. You could perhaps see a couple others, but that'll take some time. You could also have Rudy Giuliani or Chris Christie perhaps be in the mix as well.
On the other side of the aisle, they're chomping at the bit and they're enjoying some of the chaos at the White House, but Democrats have their own internal chaos and their own internal divisions. And one of them is playing out in terms of their litmus test, or lack thereof, for congressional candidates in 2018.
Right.
Congressman Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico, who is the head of the DCCC, said there's going to be no litmus test for Democrats when it comes to pro-life, pro-choice. I mean, the number of pro-life Democrats you could fit into a phone booth if they still existed. But even just theoretically saying there's no litmus test on that issue, as compared to what the diversity on the issue you have on the Republican side, has drawn a rebuke from NARAL and other hardline pro-abort leftists. So, on some of these moral issues with how far left the 21st century Democrat Party has gone, there really is little tolerance for anything outside the orthodoxy from a lot of their core constituencies, isn't there?
Oh, there's no question about that. And, yeah, I think that there was a firestorm yesterday when he said that. Look, this is one of the challenges you have when you try to win a large number of seats, which the Democrats are trying to do. They're trying to win at least 24 seats net next year to try to take back the House. A lot of those districts are going to be districts that are in areas where people are more socially conservative. Maybe in the Midwest, you might have to be more of a moderate Democrat to have a chance. Even some of the Senate seats this year are from states that would be more socially conservative: Montana, West Virginia, Indiana, Missouri. So, it is interesting. I mean, Democrats, talk a lot about having an open mind and being, reasonable and things like that. And then when one of their top political officials mentions, listen, we might be willing to consider being open to someone who's pro-life as a Democrat, there's a firestorm. It does say a lot about how close-minded Democrats are.
Yeah, they're and how unbounded they are by their own hypocrisy. At least we try to be bounded by our hypocrisy on the right. All right, Matt Mackowiak, Republican strategist, president of the Potomac Strategy Group. Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.